Dad, this is your story, told through DNA.
Curtis, before we tell you where your family came from, we need to tell you something larger. Something your DNA has been holding for longer than memory, longer than nations, longer than names written in record books. Your story begins in Baltimore. It moves through Zebulon, North Carolina, and Chester, South Carolina, but it reaches far beyond both. It reaches back through fathers and mothers, through rivers and coastlines, through kingdoms and forests, through people whose names were never written down, but whose lives were never lost. Your DNA, the genetic instructions that shaped your hands, your voice, your strength, your particular way of moving through the world, carries more than information. It carries inheritance. It carries survival. It carries the memory of people who walked this earth long before history had pages to hold them. And when we follow what your DNA revealed, it did not point to one small place. It opened the story of a continent. This is that story. We begin at the beginning. Not your beginning, the beginning. Curtis, your DNA contains something that stops geneticists in their tracks every time they see it. You carry the genetic signature of the Hadza people of Tanzania, one of the oldest human lineages on the face of the earth. The Hadza have lived around the shores of Lake Eyasi in the East African Rift Valley for longer than most civilizations have existed. They speak a click language, one of the rarest and most ancient language forms on Earth. They are hunters and gatherers. Their DNA diverged from the rest of humanity's more than 100,000 years ago, and still evidence of their DNA is found within you. You also carry the DNA of the Khoisan, also known as the San people of Southern Africa. The San hold the record as the oldest continuous human genetic lineage anywhere on the planet. When scientists look for the deep root of the human family tree, the San and the Hadza are always at its base. Curtis, those people are in you. Every father before your father, every mother before your mother, going back further than memory can reach. They carried these people forward through time, across continents and oceans, all the way to Baltimore, Maryland. To you. Your DNA doesn't come from one corner of Africa, Curtis. Your ancestors represent the continent. You carry Nilo-Saharan ancestry, the genetic signature of peoples from South Sudan, Chad, the Great Sahel, the Dinka, the Nuer, the Kanuri, warriors and farmers and traders who built lives along ancient waterways that today are desert. 10,000 years ago, the Sahara was green, rivers, lakes, abundant life. The ancestors who carried that Nilo-Saharan signature in your blood walked a landscape that no longer exists. You carry Omotic ancestry from the Ethiopian highlands, one of the only nations in Africa never colonized, ancient, proud, mountain people. And you carry Biaka ancestry, the forest peoples of Central Africa, among the earliest inhabitants of the Congo Basin rainforest, peoples whose relationship with the forest goes back further than we can measure. Curtis, before we even arrive at the kingdoms and the empires, before we get to the names and the nations your DNA most strongly reflects, know this: you are a Pan-African man. The entire continent of Africa contributed to making you. Now we follow a single thread, the most direct line your DNA contains, your Y chromosome. Every man carries a Y chromosome passed from his father, who got it from his father, who got it from his father. Unchanged, unbroken, father to son, all the way back to the beginning of that line. Curtis, your Y chromosome carries a signature called haplogroup EF3750, and it points with remarkable precision to one place on Earth. the Nigerian-Benin corridor of West Africa. This is the land of the Yoruba, one of the largest and most ancient civilizations in all of Africa. The Yoruba built Ile-Ife, a city they believe to be the birthplace of human civilization itself. They created beautiful art, bronze castings, terracotta sculptures, beaded royal garments. This is also the land of the Kingdom of Benin, not the modern country, but the ancient empire, whose brass and bronze work is considered among the finest art ever produced by human hands. Their king, the Oba, commanded armies, controlled trade routes, and received ambassadors from across the known world. Every man in your direct paternal line, Curtis, your father, his father, his father's father, stretching back across the ocean and into the soil of West Africa, carried this same Y chromosome. The same Y chromosome you carry now and have passed forward to Eric. That unbroken male line goes straight to those men, to that world, to Ile-Ife, to Benin, to the Niger Delta. That is where your fathers come from. If your DNA has a homeland, it is here, West Africa. West Africa is where the largest single concentration of your ancestry gathers. Nigeria, Ghana, Ivory Coast, Benin, Togo, Senegal, Mali. Together, these West African regions account for more than 40% of the story written in your DNA. And within that story, Nigeria stands as one of the strongest signals, a deep ancestral marker pointing back toward the lands and peoples of the Gulf of Guinea in the West African interior. From Ghana and the Ivory Coast come the Akan peoples, the Ashanti, builders of a golden empire whose wealth and gold became legendary. They built systems of power, trade, art, and memory that shaped West Africa for generations. And when outside forces tried to dominate them, they resisted. Akan culture gave the world the concept of Sankofa, the bird that flies forward while looking back. Go back and fetch what was lost. Curtis, that is exactly what this video is doing. From Benin and Togo come the Iwe and Fan peoples, whose spiritual traditions were so powerful, so deeply held, that they survived the Middle Passage. Their beliefs, transformed and adapted, became voodoo in Haiti, candomblé in Brazil, and wove themselves into the spiritual fabric of Black America. And from Nigeria comes another powerful thread, Yoruba, Edo, Igbo, and other peoples whose kingdoms, cities, art, trade networks, and spiritual systems helped shape the history of West Africa and the African diaspora. When your ancestors crossed the ocean, they carried memory. They carried language, rhythm, faith, names, customs, and ways of seeing the world. The ocean took much, but it did not take everything. Your ancestors carried West Africa across the water in their bodies, in their spirits, and in the memory of who they were. No one could take that. 9% of your DNA comes from Senegal, 5% from Mali. Together, they point to one of the greatest civilizations, the Mali Empire. At its height in the 14th century, the Mali Empire, ruled by Mansa Musa, was one of the largest and wealthiest nations on earth. Timbuktu was not a remote outpost. It was a university city with libraries, scholars, and manuscripts on astronomy, mathematics, medicine, and law, at a time when much of Europe was still in the Dark Ages. And from this world came one of Africa's most sacred traditions, the griot, the keeper of memory, the one who holds the history of a people in his voice. In Mande culture, you don't need to write things down if you have a griot. They memorize generations of ancestry. They keep the dead alive in the memory of the living. Curtis, this video is an act of griot. Your daughter is doing what the griots of Senegal and Mali have done for 1,000 years, reaching back into history, calling your ancestors by name, and bringing them forward into the present so you can know them. That impulse, that need is in your DNA. Only a small trace of your DNA points directly to Cameroon, less than 1%. But beside it stands something much larger, more than 13% Eastern Bantu. Together, they tell one of the greatest migration stories in human history. Thousands of years ago, communities speaking early Bantu languages began moving out from the region around modern Cameroon in southeastern Nigeria. South, east, then south again. They carried language, they carried farming knowledge, they carried tools, ironworking skill, and ways of building community. Over centuries and millennia, their descendants spread across much of sub-Saharan Africa, through the forests of Central Africa, toward the Great Lakes, along the East African coast, and eventually into the south of the continent. Today, hundreds of millions of people speak Bantu languages: Swahili, Zulu, Kikuyu, Shona, Lingala, languages whose roots reach back to that long movement of people across Africa. Curtis, when we see Eastern Bantu in your DNA, we are not looking at a small side note. We are looking at the journey itself. That tiny Cameroon trace may point back toward the old Western doorway, but the Eastern Bantu signature shows the road that ancient movement took, where it traveled, where it took root, and where its descendants carry the story forward. You carry not just an origin point, you carry motion. You carry the memory of people who walked the continent and left their story in the bloodlines they became. The regions your DNA comes from: Nigeria, Ghana, Senegal, Mali, Cameroon, Benin. These were the exact regions most heavily targeted by the transatlantic slave trade. The Bight of Benin, the Gold Coast, Senegambia, the Congo-Angola coast. Between the 16th and 19th centuries, more than 12 million people were taken from these shores, taken from their families, their villages, their languages, and their names. Your ancestors did not choose this crossing. They were carpenters and farmers, mothers and warriors, priests and traders, people with full lives and deep roots, and they were taken. Virginia and South Carolina, the states where your family's American story begins, were among the largest points of arrival. The ships came in, and the people who stepped off them or were carried off them carried Africa in their bodies, in their DNA, in their memory, in everything the ocean could not wash away. They survived. You are here because they survived. Not all of the threads in your DNA come from Africa. We can call the name of a European ancestor who arrived in America in 1743, Margaret Higgins. Your fifth great-grandmother traveled to Hanover, Virginia from Armagh, Ireland. She was sent to America as an indentured servant. Margaret Higgins would later be documented as the Widow Higgins. She is the oldest ancestor your family has been able to document by name. Documents show that Margaret had 3 biracial sons: Zachariah, Obadiah, and Malachiah. The name of the black man who fathered her children is unknown. All of Margaret's children carried her surname as proof of their status as free persons of color. Curtis, you carry 6% Celtic and Irish DNA. The Central Scotland and Northern Ireland, the Munster Irish, that is Margaret. She arrived on these shores an outsider. She made a life. You carry a variation of her name over 300 years after her birth, and her DNA is a part of your story. Curtis, we need to talk about where you get it from. That thing you do. That tendency to look at a rule and decide, on your own terms, whether it deserves to be followed. In October of 1849, a notice appeared in the Wilmington Journal in North Carolina. It was a runaway slave advertisement, posted by a man named Guilford Horn of Goldsboro, North Carolina. He was looking for an enslaved man named Harry, a carpenter, About 40 years old, Harry had run away, and according to the newspaper article, Harry had a plan. The advertisement said Harry intended to obtain free papers using the name of a free colored man from Nash County by the name of Moses Higgins. Moses is your second great-grandfather. He was a free man, free in North Carolina in 1849, which meant he lived every day navigating a system designed to strip him of everything he had. And yet, he drafted free papers using his own identity to help others have a chance at freedom. He knew his name would appear in newspapers. He knew what he was doing was against the law. He did it anyway. Your grandfather did not follow rules that he didn't agree with. So breaking a rule or two is just in your DNA. Curtis. On your mother's side of the family, history recorded a name, Darius Snowden. On March 31st, 1840, 25 years before the end of the Civil War, your second great-grandfather was recognized as a free man under the law of the time. His manumission was recorded in Baltimore County records. The document describes him plainly. Aged about 24 years, of dark complexion, 5 feet 6 inches high, has 2 scars on the right side of the face. Darius Snowden was a man with hopes, dreams, and the determination to build a better life. By 1850, Darius was working as a waiter on the railroad. In that era, a black man working the railroads was not a small thing. It required intelligence, composure, the ability to navigate a white world on its own terms every single day while never losing yourself. Darius Snowden did that. On May 30th, 1872, Darius walked into the Freedmen's Bank and deposited $55. To understand what that sacrifice meant, the 1870 census records the total value of his family's personal estate in Talbot County at $125. He had saved and deposited the equivalent of nearly half of everything they had. That is not a transaction. That is a declaration. Darius followed opportunity north to New York City. Like so many black men of his era, he left his wife Ann Matilda and their children, Georgiana, Charlotte, and Samuel, in Talbot County, Maryland, while he worked to build something better from a distance. It must have been a hard decision, but sometimes loving your family means making the harder choice, choosing sacrifice and uncertainty over the comfort of home. Curtis, this is a story you know. Your parents made that same choice when they left family behind in Baltimore and moved to New Jersey for better opportunities. And you made it yourself, leaving New Jersey, taking your wife and children to California, then North Carolina, then Georgia. Not because it was easy, because it was necessary. That willingness to go where you have to go, to do what has to be done for the people you love. It didn't start with you. It started with Darius, and it was carried forward by the daughter he left behind in Talbot County, who took everything her father sacrificed, everything her mother held together, and turned it into something that would outlast all of them. Her name was Georgiana Snowden, and she was your great-grandmother. Georgiana grew up in eastern Talbot County, Maryland. As early as 1788, before the Constitution was even ratified, a free black people in Talbot County had established the Hill, a community in Easton where they purchased property, built churches, and created something radical simply by existing freely. Historians now believe the Hill may be the oldest free African-American neighborhood in the United States. This was the world that raised Georgiana Snowden, a world that had been building, organizing, and preparing for nearly 80 years for the moment freedom finally came for everyone. And when that moment arrived, Georgiana was ready. By November of 1868, Georgiana Snowden was running the Graham Color School in Easton, Maryland. She had no support from the local school board. The Freedmen's Bureau did not pay her rent. The public sentiment toward her school, she wrote in her own words in the official monthly report, seemingly indifferent. The school building was not handed to her. According to Georgiana's own report, it was owned by the colored people of Easton themselves. In November 1868, the school collected $12.30 in tuition from families who had almost nothing, and gave what they could because they knew this mattered. By 1869, the Graham Color School had 95 pupils, one of the highest enrollment levels of any freedmen school in the region. Think about what that means, Curtis. Parents were walking their children past indifference, past hostility, past every obstacle the world placed in their path, and bringing them to Georgiana School. Because in a world that was still deciding whether black people deserved to be educated at all, Georgiana Snowden had already decided. The answer was yes. Georgiana Snowden did not wait for the world to make space for her. She made her own. You come from a long line of people who looked at what the world offered them and decided it wasn't enough. They did it so that eventually, generations down the line, a man would be born in Baltimore, Maryland, who carried all of them in his DNA, and in the very way he moves through the world. And he would know, without ever being told, that you don't wait for permission. You open the door. You walk through it. That is your inheritance, Curtis. Curtis, your DNA contains 2 additional threads that deserve to be named. On your father's side, through the Higgins line of Virginia and North Carolina, you carry Native American DNA. Your Higgins family lived for generations in Virginia and North Carolina, on land connected to indigenous peoples whose histories began well before modern record keeping. In Virginia, the Hanover County region was connected to Powhatan peoples, including Pamunkey and Chickahominy tribes, whose histories were shaped by rivers, forests, and villages long before colonies existed. In the part of North Carolina where your Higgins family lived, the land now known as Nash, Franklin, Edgecombe, and Wilson counties, the native history points most closely toward Tuscarora, Saponi, and Occaneechi peoples. Their histories belong to river towns, Siouan-speaking Piedmont communities, and old trading paths that once connected native nations across North Carolina and Virginia. From your mother's side, you carry 1% Southwest Indian DNA. Southwest India carries histories of ancient coastlines, Dravidian languages, spice routes, seafaring, poetry, mathematics, astronomy, and trade routes that once connected India with Africa, Arabia, and beyond. How this DNA traveled through your mother's line is a story the records have not yet revealed. It is there as a reminder that your DNA is not one story. It is a gathering of many stories: African, European, Indigenous American, and Southwest Indian, each one leaving a trace, each one becoming part of the man you are. Curtis, we have traveled a long way together, from the ancient shores of East Africa to the kingdoms of West Africa, from the forest of Cameroon to the rivers of Mali, from the coast of Ireland to the Virginia Piedmont. Your DNA tells a story that begins at the very dawn of human life on Earth. You carry the genetic signature of the Hadza of Tanzania, one of the oldest human lineages on the planet, the Khoisan of Southern Africa, the oldest continuous genetic lineage of any living people on Earth, before there were kingdoms, before there were names for any of them. Your ancestors were already here, from West Africa, Nigeria, Ghana, Senegal, Mali, Benin, Togo, comes the heart of who you are. The Bantu peoples of Cameroon, whose great migration walked an entire continent and left their mark on every people they passed. That DNA survived the Middle Passage. It survived Charleston, Virginia, and the Carolinas. It survived being torn from an Irish homeland and brought across an ocean into indentured servitude in a strange and unforgiving land. It carries the memory of Native American civilizations. It carries the ancient signature of the peoples of southwestern India, whose presence in your story remains one of its most beautiful mysteries. Survival is not passive, Curtis. Every ancestor in your DNA made a choice to endure, to resist, to build, to love, and to keep going, even through the toughest of times. You are the Hadza hunter on the shore of Lake Eyasi. You are the bronze caster in the kingdom of Benin. You are the griot on the banks of the Niger, holding history in his voice so it will never be lost. You are the Powhatan rivers and the Dravidian temples, the ancient savannah and the Carolina Piedmont. You are Baltimore and every place in between. You are Margaret Hagans, Moses Hagans, Darius Snowden, Georgiana Snowden, William Hope, Estella Smackham, Frank Higgins, Joanna Hall, Naomi Hope, Spencer Higgins, and the many, many ancestors whose names history did not record, but whose lives are written permanently and undeniably in your DNA. You are the evidence of their existence. And this is your story told through DNA.